Welcome back to our discussion of HTML. Today we're going to discuss debugging HTML. So syntax versus logic errors. Syntax errors in a programming language stop production. We've seen that if you've worked in Java or C# or C++. Syntax errors in the language means the compiler doesn't understand or agree that you're using the syntax of the language correctly, and it stops production of object code. So you need to fix the syntax errors before you go on. HTML syntax errors are tolerated in the browser and are fixed up. Badly formed HTML can still display, but ambiguous cases emerge. So in effect, syntax errors are turned into logic errors. So for this, we're going to have a reference, definitely, the debugging HTML on the MDN page, and there's the link, and we'll take a look at the example. So I have the HTML on the right here, and let's go over the errors that are in that HTML. So the paragraph tag is not closed here. Then we have the an unordered list and a list item here. Let's scroll to the right here. So here the strong element is not closed, and the list item is not closed. And so there's two errors there. Then the list item continues, another list item. And this, in this case, the closed also, but also the strong and the emphasis tag are not nested correctly. So nesting rules indicate that you begin a strong and begin an EM. That's correct. But EM must end before strong ends because those are nested elements. They have to be perfectly nested. Furthermore, in the previous list item, a strong tag was opened and not closed, just like the list item itself. Here into the next list item, unclosed attributes, another common source of HTML problems. And here we see the string here for the href is not closed properly. Now let's look over in the browser and let's see the results of how this is rendered. And clearly there's some errors here. The missing paragraph in tag seem to be recovered from very nicely here. What causes an error in HTML? So the unordered list starts properly. And then we have unclosed elements here. And the strong tag is probably meant to be closed within this list item, but it's not. And you can see that it continues on here. So it's not ended, so it continues on into the other element. And then this is not, then it kind of pollutes this case. So let's take a look at this and just end this real quick here. Okay, with that strong tag ended there, you now see the beginning strong tag here, not here, badly nested estimate, strong, and then strongly emphasized. That looks like it's emphasized and strong. And then the strong tag ends and the emphasis continues. Okay, so even those are badly nested, it seems to be that it was correctly interpreted in the browser. Let's put this back here the way it was. And you can see that this, because that strong tag never ended, it continues on. So let's look at this next list item, and we'll see probably the worst effect of a grammar error in HTML here. We begin another list item, and then we have an unclosed string at the end of this. And essentially, it looks like it consumes the rest of the content of the page because of that unclosed string. You can think of that string as being essentially continued on until essentially the browser can't make sense of it. Let's take a look at how the browser actually rendered this HTML. So I'm going to open up the developer tools, Control-Shift-I here. And this time, we're going to return back to the Elements tab that we started with, where we looked at the box model, essentially. And over here, we'll look closer at this. This is actually the picture of the document object model, the way the document object model was rendered by the browser. So it looks a lot like the HTML. Of course, it was based on that, but this is really the in-memory representation of what this was created. And look here, this paragraph element is ended here. So the browser assumed that. over here. Another element is starting. So therefore, it correctly guessed where the paragraph must come to an end. And you'll see that. As you begin a new major element, the previous element will be closed whether you closed it or not in your HTML. And here we have the unordered list beginning, and then we have the individual list items in here. Now you can see the strong element is not closed properly. It's not closed in this list. Neither is the list item. However, just like the paragraph is ended here, in the browser when the browser renders the DOM. The list item ends here, and it closes automatically the tags that were open that are nested inside of it. Notice how what the browser is doing. It's creating syntactically correct DOM out of syntactically incorrect HTML. So the DOM ends up to be syntactically correct, and it would have to be because that's the in-memory representation of the HTML. It has to be syntactically correct, or it's going to be corrupted, and even more bugs will emerge in the browser itself in terms of instability of the page, not just not rendering some elements properly. So if the browser ended this strong tag here, how come this continues to be strong? And it's because it keeps it begins the strong element again at the beginning of this list item. It carries through the meaning of the HTML source while fixing up the grammar in the actual document object model. So since the strong tag wasn't properly closed, it continues it, but it begins a new strong tag and ends it when the list item ends. This list item doesn't end as well. So when it closes this list item, it closes the strong and then picks it back up again, because that strong never has a matching property. Now let's look inside here. And inside here we have the badly nested emphasis tags and strong tags. And you can see it fixed that up too. Also maintaining, so we have the beginning of the strong tag and the emphasis which is embedded in it but not ended here in the HTML. It's ended here. Then when the strong tag ends, and then the emphasis takes back up again, and you can see that flavor of it. While the emphasis tag is still on, we'll properly close it in the DOM, but we'll continue it on in the DOM also, but this time one with proper syntax. The beginning of the string here is what gives it the browser a hard time, and you can see what it did. It said, okay, there's a beginning of a string, and I don't find the end of it. So it fixes up the grammar by putting the entire list item element in the content of it in a string, and then it ignores the rest of the text on the browser. Strings in general give programming languages a hard time because anything can belong in a string, and if a string ends, programming languages, if a string does not end and it begins, then everything following it can be consumed in the string, at least until a new line. But in HTML, there's really nothing essentially the rest of the HTML must belong in the string. That's the way the browser is treating it. And then the href tag is badly formed because all it is this. And so it's thrown away, and everything else is consumed in the string, and there's nothing to do with it. So it begins the string and ends the string in the DOM and throws away the rest of the HTML. So that's a quick introduction of how the browser interprets badly formed HTML, how it makes properly formed document object model out of it, but with interpretation errors because it's doing the best that it can. There is some help here for us in terms of proper HTML. I'll copy this code here, Control A, and the W3C markup validation service. Now, don't confuse this with W3 Schools. W3C is actually the committee that is in charge of HTML and CSS. So they have a validation service where you can validate by URL, essentially entering in a website, and then validate by file upload. You can upload your HTML file. Here's validate by direct input. I've already copied my HTML to the clipboard, so I'll paste it in here, and we'll check. And here we have the elements that we've already gone over, but automated. List item is implied. The in tag list item is implied, but they were open elements. The list item ended badly. Here we have the unclosed tag strong, as we saw. Strong violates nested rule with the emphasis inside of strong. Again, the list item is implied, but there were open elements. And then we've reached the end of reached the inside of an attribute tag and ignoring tag. That's here. This is the attribute. The href is the attribute of the a tag, and it's not, the attribute's not closed, so it just consumes the rest of the file. We've into file seen, and there were open elements, so it consumes the rest of the file and what's happening there. So again, the browser fixes that up, and you can see explicitly all your HTML errors here in this W3 schools, or pardon me, no, I made the mistake. The W3 org validator service. So HTML debugging and syntax errors. Thank you.